The emergency beacon cut through subspace like a scream, broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used for diplomatic contact in 300 cycles. The Galactic Council's monitoring station on Kepler-7 picked it up at 3:47 Standard Time, and within minutes, every major civilization in the Outer Rim had intercepted the transmission. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb of the UES Defiant. We are experiencing catastrophic system failures approximately 47 light-years from the Sol system. Hull breach in sectors 4 through 7. Life support failing. If anyone receives this transmission, we are not hostile. Repeat, we are not hostile." The message played on loop for 6 hours before the first response came through. Operations Chief Krelver had been monitoring deep space communications for 47 years. He'd heard distress calls from mining vessels, research ships, even the occasional pirate crew begging for mercy after tangling with patrol fleets. But this was different. The transmission wasn't just desperate. It was structured, methodical, almost military in its precision. "Run a species identification scan," Krelver ordered his junior technician. "Cross-reconcession the vocal patterns and language syntax with our databases." The results came back in minutes. Unknown species. No diplomatic contact established. No territorial agreements on file. The computer couldn't even classify the basic linguistics. "Sir?" The technician's voice carried a note of confusion. "The transmission is coming from the restricted zone, grid section 7 Alpha. That's the quarantine boundary," Krelver finished. "Nobody goes there, nobody comes back from there." The quarantine zone had been established after the Velkari expedition disappeared without a trace. 17 ships, 300 crew members, and the most advanced sensor array in the galaxy, all gone. The Council had declared the entire sector off-limits and installed warning beacons on every hyperspace route leading to the area, but something had just broadcast from the heart of it. Within hours, the transmission had reached the Central Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Veltar, senior diplomatic liaison for First Contact Protocols, reviewed the message with growing irritation. Another primitive species, probably barely capable of interstellar travel, crying for help the moment they encountered real space. "Prepare a standard response," he told his aide. "Category 7 protocol demand immediate surrender and compliance with galactic law." His aide hesitated. "Sir, they claim to be non-hostile. Perhaps we should—" "They entered restricted space," Veltar cut him off. "They're broadcasting on emergency frequencies without authorization. They're already in violation of at least 12 treaties they've never heard of. Send the message." The response went out within the hour, broadcast on the same frequency the humans had used. "Unknown vessel. You have violated Galactic Council territory and broadcast without authorization. You will power down all systems and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. You have 30 standard minutes to comply." The reply came back in less than 5. "This is Lieutenant Webb. I'm not sure what you mean by Galactic Council, but we're kind of busy trying not to die over here. Our reactor is leaking radiation, our hull is compromised, and 3 of my crew are unconscious from atmospheric toxicity. If you want to help, we could use some medical supplies and maybe someone who knows how to fix a quantum drive motivator. If you don't want to help, that's fine too, but maybe save the military posturing for after we figure out if we're all going to suffocate." The transmission ended with what sounded like muffled laughter. Veltar stared at the communication console in disbelief. In 3 centuries of diplomatic service, no one had ever responded to a council ultimatum with sarcasm. "Sir," his aide prompted, "run a full background check. I want to know everything about this species. Everything." The search began immediately, but the results were troubling. The word human appeared in exactly 1 document in the entire galactic database, a classified intelligence report filed by the Exploration Council 43 years ago. The report was tagged with the highest security clearance and sealed under Council Directive 847. Veltar had never heard of Directive 847. It took 6 hours and 3 different authorization codes to access the file. When it finally opened, Veltar found himself staring at a single page of text that made his blood freeze. Species designation, human. Planet of origin, Earth, Sol system. Status, Extreme caution advised. Do not engage, do not approach, do not establish contact under any circumstances. The report was signed by Admiral Thexra, the Council's former Chief of Military Operations. Thexra had been the most decorated officer in galactic history, veteran of 7 major conflicts, survivor of the Omega Nebula incident. He'd also been missing for 43 years. The last entry in his personal log, dated 1 day before his disappearance. Proceeding to Sol System for routine survey, expect to return within 1 cycle. Veltar's hands were shaking as he closed the file. 3 species had already filed emergency relocation requests, moving their entire colonies away from any sector that might potentially border human space. The HFY had gone so far as to petition for a complete directional reversal of their expansion fleet, but that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the timestamp on the distress call. Lieutenant Marcus Webb wasn't calling for help from some remote accident site. He was broadcasting from the exact coordinates where Admiral Thexra's fleet had vanished 43 years ago. The emergency session convened on Nexus Prime within 18 hours of the classified file discovery. 7 major civilizations sent their highest-ranking military advisors, each representing fleets that had never known defeat. The holographic war table displayed a single blip in the quarantine zone, 1 human vessel, apparently damaged, broadcasting distress signals that had somehow become the galaxy's most unsettling mystery. Fleet Admiral Zexai of the Dominion spoke first, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively at the tactical display. 1 ship. Primitive technology. 43 years of isolation in dead space. Whatever happened to Admiral Zexai's fleet? It cannot have been military action. Agreed, rumbled General Korth of the Hegemony. Our intelligence suggests the vessel is barely functional. Life support failures, hull breaches, radiation leaks. They're already dying. The Valkyrie representative, Supreme Tactician Reloth, activated a series of combat projections. Standard engagement protocol: 12 heavy cruisers, 47 destroyer escorts, 3 dreadnoughts. Estimated time to complete subjugation, 4 minutes, 18 seconds. You are overestimating, interjected Admiral Nexus of the Core Worlds. 2 heavy cruisers would be sufficient. This is a rescue operation, not a war. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was unanimous. Whatever had happened in the quarantine zone, it couldn't possibly represent a military threat. The human ship would be secured, the crew interrogated, and the mystery of Admiral Thexra's disappearance finally solved. The vote was recorded at 23:47 Standard Time. 7 civilizations, 0 dissenting opinions, full authorization for military intervention. But first, 1 final attempt at diplomacy. The transmission reached the human vessel at 6:23 the following morning. Captain Jake Morrison had been awake for 36 hours straight, managing reactor repairs while his crew worked to seal hull breaches that kept spreading despite their best efforts. The last thing he expected was an official surrender demand from something calling itself the Galactic Hegemony. Captain Morrison, the message began, you are in violation of galactic law. Power down your vessel immediately and prepare for boarding. This is your final warning. Morrison stared at the communication console, coffee mug halfway to his lips. Then he started laughing. You have got to be kidding me, he said to his communications officer. We're leaking radiation. Our hull is held together with emergency patches and prayer, and these people want to arrest us? Sir, what should I tell them? Morrison's grin was visible even through the emergency lighting. Tell them we're having a really bad day and they just made it worse. The response went out on all frequencies. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Defiant. We've been stranded in this godforsaken sector for 3 days, living on emergency rations and recycled air. Our reactor is 1 malfunction away from turning us into a very expensive firework display. 3 of my crew are in medical bay with radiation poisoning, and I just found out that my nav computer has been lying to me about our position for the past week. So here's what's going to happen. Either you're going to help us fix our ship, either you're going to leave us alone. But if you think you're going to board my vessel and arrest my crew, you'd better bring more than harsh language and a stern voice. The transmission ended with the sound of something exploding in the background, followed by Morrison's voice yelling, That's normal, probably. The recording was played back 17 times in the Hegemony Command Center. Linguistic analysis confirmed that the human captain had just refused a direct military order from 7 allied civilizations. Psychological evaluations suggested either complete mental breakdown or unprecedented levels of confidence. He's either insane or... Admiral Nexus trailed off. Or what? Demanded General Korth. Or he knows something we don't. The Hegemony's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was the most advanced warship in galactic history. Its targeting systems could track a grain of sand through a nebula, its weapons could crack a moon in half, and its defensive screens had never been breached. When it dropped out of hyperspace alongside 47 escort vessels, the sensor arrays immediately began scanning for the human ship. They found nothing. Run a full spectrum analysis, ordered Captain Velthak. Check for cloaking devices, stealth fields, anything that might hide a vessel. The results came back negative. According to every sensor on the ship, there was nothing in the immediate area except background radiation and stellar debris. Sir, the tactical officer's voice carried a note of confusion. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Scream. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the main display, looking remarkably calm for someone who was supposedly surrounded by an overwhelming military force. Nice ships, he said conversationally. 48 vessels if I'm counting correctly. Impressive firepower. Beautiful formation flying. Captain Velthak felt his blood chill. How is he? The thing is, Morrison continued, you can't target what you can't see. And right now, you can't see us. The targeting officer frantically worked his controls. Sir, the sensors show empty space. There's nothing there. Check the transmission source, Velthak ordered. The results made no sense. The signal was coming from directly in front of them, less than 2,000 meters away, but the most sophisticated sensor array in the galaxy showed nothing but vacuum. That's impossible, the tactical officer whispered. Morrison's grin widened. Captain, you just used my favorite word. Impossible. We get that a lot. The emergency communication went out from the Eternal Dominion at 8:47 Standard Time, marked with the highest priority classification in the Hegemony's database. Dr. Kexran, the fleet's chief physicist, had never used the fundamental reality breach protocol in 30 years of service. Today seemed like a good day to start. This is Dr. Kexran aboard the Eternal Dominion. I need immediate consultation with the Theoretical Physics Institute on Nexus Prime, Priority Alpha 7. The response came back within minutes. Dr. Kextram, this is Professor Velenash. What's the nature of your emergency? I'm looking at a ship that doesn't exist. There was a long pause. Could you elaborate? We have 48 vessels targeting a human ship that's 2,000 meters directly in front of us. Our sensors detect nothing. Our targeting computers show empty space, but we're receiving video transmissions from something that's clearly there. Are you certain your equipment is functioning properly? Kexiran glanced at the diagnostic readouts. Every system showed green. I've run full diagnostics 3 times. Everything's working perfectly. The ship simply isn't there, according to our physics. That's impossible. Yes, I know. That's why I'm calling you. Within an hour, 3 different universities had confirmed the same thing. What the Hegemony fleet was describing violated approximately 17 fundamental laws of physics. The University of Nexus Prime's Quantum Mechanics Department issued a formal statement declaring the entire situation academically impossible. The Advanced Physics Institute on Kepler 9 simply hung up. The third consultation came from the Galactic Science Council's most senior researcher, Dr. Thelvek, who had spent 60 years studying dimensional physics. His response was the most unsettling of all. Dr. Kexran. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. What you're describing isn't just impossible, it's familiar. Familiar? 43 years ago, Admiral Thexra's fleet reported similar anomalies before they disappeared. Ships that existed in multiple locations simultaneously. Targeting systems that couldn't lock onto solid objects. Energy readings that defied measurement. Kexran felt the temperature in the command center drop several degrees. What happened to them? We never found out. The last transmission we received was Admiral Thextra saying, "They're not following our physics." Then silence. "Doctor, are you suggesting that the humans destroyed an entire fleet using what? Impossible technology?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we're not dealing with technology at all. Maybe we're dealing with something that plays by different rules entirely." But Captain Morrison was still on the communication channel, still grinning, still somehow managing to exist in a space where he shouldn't be able to exist. "Having some technical difficulties?" he asked conversationally. Captain Veltethek had given up trying to understand what was happening. "What are you?" "Just a guy having a really bad week," Morrison replied. "But since you asked nicely, let me show you something interesting." That's when the impossible happened. The human ship materialized on every sensor screen simultaneously. Not gradually, not fading in, but appearing instantly as if it had always been there. But it wasn't where it should have been. It was directly above the hegemony flagship, close enough that the crew could see individual hull plates through the observation windows. "How did you—" Velthak started. "That's not the interesting part," Morrison interrupted. "This is—" The Defiant rotated 90 degrees on its axis, a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship with reported engine failures. Then it dropped straight down, passing through the flagship's defensive screens like they weren't there. "Shields up," Veltak shouted. "Sir, shields are already at maximum power," the tactical officer reported. "They're not responding to the human vessel." The Defiant continued its descent, passing through the ship's hull without causing any damage, any breach, any indication that solid matter was interacting with solid matter. The crew watched in stunned silence as the human ship emerged from the bottom of their vessel and continued moving downward toward the next ship in formation. "As vessels, open fire!" General Korth's voice crackled over the fleet communication system. 47 ships unleashed enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Energy beams, plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, and gravitational disruptors all converged on the space where the human ship had been. The weapons passed through empty space and struck 3 of their own vassals. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Velthek screamed into his communicator. The fleet's weapons fell silent, leaving only the sound of alarms and the crackle of overloaded systems from the ships that had been caught in their own crossfire. "Interesting weapons," Morrison's voice came through the communication system. "Very impressive. Terrible accuracy, though." The Defiant was now visible on sensors again, stationary exactly where it had been when the engagement began. According to the tactical computers, it had never moved. "Sir," the science officer's voice was barely a whisper. "According to our logs, the human ship has been in the same position for the entire encounter. It never moved. But we all saw it move." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir. We're getting that a lot today." The command structure began to collapse in real time. Admiral Nexus, coordinating the engagement from his command ship, found himself staring at tactical displays that showed 47 different versions of reality. Half his fleet reported the human ship directly in front of them. The other half insisted it was behind them. 3 vessels claimed it was somehow inside their own hulls. "What are our orders, sir?" his tactical officer asked. Admiral Nexus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. What were the orders for a situation that couldn't exist? How do you engage an enemy that wasn't there? How do you defend against weapons that didn't work the way weapons were supposed to work? "Sir?" the officer prompted. "Aye." Admiral Nexus stared at the display screen, watching the human ship that was simultaneously in 17 different locations, according to 17 different sensor arrays. "I don't know." The admission rippled through the fleet communication system. 47 ship captains, all waiting for orders that made sense, all staring at tactical situations that violated everything they'd been trained to understand. "This is Captain Morrison to the Hegemony Fleet." The human's voice cut through the confusion. "I think we need to talk." But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that every single ship in the fleet was receiving the transmission from a different direction. What happened next made galactic history, and not in a good way. The communication channel went silent for exactly 47 seconds. Then Captain Morrison's voice came through, carrying a tone that made every military officer in the fleet suddenly remember their first day of basic training. Gentlemen, ladies, and whatever the hell that tentacled thing in the third ship is, we need to clear something up. You seem to think I'm some kind of advanced military threat. That's flattering, but wrong. I'm a lieutenant who got promoted to captain because everyone above me is either dead or missing, commanding a ship that's held together with emergency patches and sheer stubbornness. Admiral Nexus leaned forward. Then how? How am I doing the impossible? Morrison's laugh was tired, almost bitter. Because you've got it backwards. This isn't advanced human technology. This is what happens when human technology breaks down. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of ship systems and the distant sound of something sparking on Morrison's end of the transmission. You want to know what we call this? Morrison continued. We call it Tuesday. See, human engineering has a little quirk. When our stuff breaks, it doesn't just stop working. It gets creative. Our quantum drives don't just fail, they start ignoring physics out of spite. Our defensive systems don't just shut down, they start existing in 17 dimensions at once just to be difficult. Dr. Kexren's voice cut through the fleet communication system. That's impossible. Technology doesn't work that way. Doc, I've been impossible for 3 days straight. My reactor is running on backup power that doesn't exist, my hull is sealed with emergency foam that shouldn't hold in hard vacuum, and my navigation computer is calculating routes through space that isn't there. Want to know the really fun part? This is normal for us. The revelation hit the fleet like a physical blow. The most advanced military force in galactic history had been outmaneuvered by a ship that was literally falling apart. Captain Velthig found himself reviewing the tactical logs with growing horror. Every impossible maneuver the human ship had performed wasn't some advanced military strategy. It was systems failing in ways that happened to be tactically advantageous. The phase shifting through their hull wasn't a weapon. It was a broken shield generator that couldn't decide which dimension it wanted to exist in. The quantum uncertainty field that's making you untargetable, Dr. Kexran said slowly. That's not intentional, is it? Intentional? Morrison's voice carried genuine amusement. Doc, my targeting computer gave up trying to figure out where I am 3 hours ago. It just displays error ship not found every time I try to run a diagnostic. I've been flying by looking out the window and making educated guesses. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't developed impossible technology. They'd developed technology so unreliable that it accidentally became impossible to counter. Their ships didn't follow the laws of physics because their systems were too broken to remember what those laws were. But here's the thing you really need to understand, Morrison continued, and his voice turned serious. This isn't our military technology. This is our civilian technology. Our actual military ships, those work properly. Admiral Nexus felt his blood freeze. What do you mean? I mean, Lieutenant Webb isn't broadcasting from a military vessel. The UES Defiant is a cargo hauler, a freighter. We use it to transport mining equipment and emergency supplies. Our actual warships don't break down in interesting ways, they just work. Efficiently, reliably, and there are a lot more of them than there are of us. But that's not the scary part, Morrison continued. The scary part is that Admiral Thexera figured this out 43 years ago. He came to Earth, saw what we were like, and decided to make us a deal. He gave us advance warning about the galactic community, helped us set up monitoring stations, taught us about the quarantine zone. In exchange, we promised to stay quiet and keep to ourselves until we were ready for proper first contact. So, General Korth's voice was barely a whisper. What happened to him? Nothing happened to him. He's been living on Lunabase for the past 40 years, helping us prepare for the day when someone would inevitably ignore all the warning signs and come looking for us. Today, apparently, the communication channel erupted in a dozen different languages as the implications sank in. The hegemony hadn't discovered a primitive species. They'd stumbled into a 40-year-old diplomatic arrangement. The distress call, Admiral Nexus said slowly. It wasn't a cry for help. And bingo, Lieutenant Webb isn't dying on some remote ship. He's sitting in a perfectly functional vessel in the asteroid belt around Saturn. broadcasting a very carefully scripted message designed to see how you'd react to finding humans in space. Congratulations, by the way. You failed spectacularly, but the most chilling part came when Morrison transmitted additional data. Ship manifests showing the true scale of human space operations, mining colonies on asteroids that official surveys had listed as uninhabitable, research stations in nebulae that were supposedly too dangerous to explore, and military installations, dozens of them, positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy. "How long have you been out here?" Admiral Nexus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Officially, about 6 months. Unofficially, we've had a presence in this galaxy for over a century. We just got really good at not being noticed. Turns out when your technology breaks in unpredictable ways, it's surprisingly easy to hide from sensors that expect things to work normally." Dr. Kexran was frantically reviewing his physics databases. "The energy signatures we've been detecting in dead zones across the galaxy. Broken human equipment, mostly. We have a bad habit of abandoning ships when the life support starts doing creative things with the local space-time. Those hazardous anomalies your people have been avoiding for decades, that's just where we parked our failed prototypes." The scope of the deception was staggering. Humanity hadn't just been hiding, they'd been using their technological failures as camouflage, turning every malfunction into a strategic advantage. The emergency evacuation orders went out within minutes. Not evacuation from the human ship, evacuation from the entire sector. Admiral Nexus found himself staring at tactical displays showing the true scope of human presence in the quarantine zone. Monitoring stations on 17 different asteroids, sensor arrays that had been tracking galactic fleet movements for decades, and dozens of ships, all running on technology that worked by not working, all invisible to every sensor system in the galaxy. "Sir?" His tactical officer's voice was hollow. "How many of them are there?" Morrison's voice answered instead. "Depends on how you count. If you mean ships in this system, about 30. If you mean ships in human space, about 3,000. If you mean humans who know exactly where every one of your military bases is and have been watching you for 40 years, well, let's just say we've been very thorough." But the real shock came when Morrison transmitted the monitoring logs. 40 years of intercepted communications, tracked fleet movements, and recorded strategic planning sessions. The humans hadn't just been hiding, they'd been studying. Every major military doctrine, every defensive strategy, every classified weapons system had been observed, analyzed, and countered. "You've been watching us this entire time," Admiral Nexus said, his voice hollow. "Admiral, we've been watching you so closely that we know more about your military capabilities than your own intelligence services do. We've been tracking supply lines, monitoring communications, and cataloging every single vessel in your fleets. We know which ships have faulty life support systems, which captains are having personal problems, and which admirals have been embezzling from the military budget." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of several officers quietly updating their personal files. The fleet communication system crackled with panicked transmissions. 3 civilizations immediately began recalling their border fleets. The Velkari started broadcasting surrender frequencies. The Zephi requested an immediate ceasefire and began transmitting their complete military databases as a gesture of good faith. "This is insane," General Korth muttered. "One species can't monitor the entire galaxy." "General, we've had 40 years to prepare and a really bad habit of making things work when they shouldn't. Did you know that a broken hyperspace communicator can actually transmit faster than light? We've been listening to your private military channels for decades. Nice invasion plans, by the way, especially the ones about Earth. We particularly enjoyed the part where you decided to attack during our primitive agricultural season." The tactical displays began showing new information as human monitoring systems revealed themselves. Every major military installation in the galaxy was being watched. Every fleet movement had been tracked. Every strategic conference had been monitored. "You knew," Admiral Nexus said slowly. "You knew we were coming. We knew you were coming before you knew you were coming. We've been preparing for this exact scenario for 40 years. The only question was whether you'd be smart enough to talk first or dumb enough to shoot first? The answer to that question was being broadcast across the galaxy as the engagement recordings spread through diplomatic channels. 7 civilizations had voted unanimously to engage a single human ship. The result was a complete collapse of military doctrine and the quiet realization that humanity had been watching them for 4 decades. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened on Nexus Prime 6 hours later. The official statement was brief. The Galactic Council acknowledges that first contact with humanity did not proceed according to established protocols. We apologize for the misunderstanding and extend an official invitation to the human species to participate in galactic civilization as equal partners. It was the first time in galactic history that the Council had apologized to anyone. Must be. More thing. Morrison's voice came through the communication system one final time. Lieutenant Webb sends his regards. He's been enjoying his catastrophic system failures immensely. Oh, and Admiral Thex wants to know if you'd like to join him for dinner. He's been working on a really interesting fusion of Earth and Valkyrie cuisine. The weakest link in humanity's chain of command had just rewrote the galactic balance of power with a single ship. A really bad attitude, and 40 years of preparation that nobody had seen coming. The emergency evacuation orders were quietly rescinded and replaced with invitations to diplomatic talks. And somewhere in the asteroid belt around Saturn, Lieutenant Webb turned off his distress beacon and started laughing.